Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a towing review of our 2016 F-250. We're getting started right now. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave your comments down below. What do you think of some of the comparisons we drew between our built 04 6.0 Powerstroke to this one? And I'm going to briefly also talk about the black truck we used to own in comparison to this truck here. We're all three trucks towed the same 13,000-ish pound camper. And also, you can't see merch. Get your merch, guys. Merch shelf down below. Don't forget to check that stuff out. All that goes to support the channel. Do a little traffic maneuver here first. All right, guys, so today we're going to be talking about this, and I'm going to talk about mainly four big topics and just reviewing this truck. So the first one being power and performance. How does this truck actually pull the load? The next thing is going to be talking about fuel economy, because I know we don't buy these trucks for it, but if you're going to get 5 miles per gallon towing 13,000 pounds, you probably want to know about it, because that would be horrendous. And the next thing we're going to talk about is features, and we're going to end with comfort. Then again, we're going to draw some comparisons between the other trucks I've used to tow the same exact camper, and we're going to do that part of the video at the end. So the 2016 F-250 with the 6.7 Powerstroke, our setup here is a crew cab short bed 4x4. So needless to say, as far as power to move this load, amazing. It does the job very, very well. It's very easy to maintain speed. I use my cruise control a lot with this, unless it's, at least when it's open road like this, there isn't much in front of me right now. It's pretty light traffic, hoping it stays on that for the rest of the trip here. So getting this load moving has been super nice to do. We are going to go over in performance section, we're going to talk about some of the engine vitals here that's happening. The reason I say that is I'm not sure where this EGT probe is. It says manifold, but I'm pretty certain the manifold one didn't read correctly on my 15. I could be wrong. I am going to say what the number is here. So we're sitting at 1100 right now, 1097 technically, and that'll go down here because we're about to start going downhill. That was relatively flat that I was pulling on, about 1100 EGT. We're going 65 miles per hour, and again, we're around 13,000 pounds. So the one thing I do want to say is I do feel pulling grades with the 6.7. The truck doesn't struggle, but if I want to really get like in it and pull that grade at like gain speed or even just maintain speed if I'm going 65, 70, I do notice my exhaust temps get a little hot. The reason I really bring this up, for typically most of these grades you're going to be pulling, is it a big deal? No, you're probably not. The truck probably isn't getting hot enough to do any real damage pulling most of these grades, unless you're like towing something crazy at 13,000 pounds. That's nothing like it's a heavy camper, but it's not anything earth-shattering compared to what's out there. But also, guys, when passing, I have plenty of power to pass. Now I'm going down a little bit of a hill here, so it makes it super easy. But we're going to pass two vehicles here that were going a little bit slower than what I was. And it's got plenty of power to do it. Now, again, I'm going downhill in EGTs. 1150 is the highest I've seen here. And I wasn't really in the throttle, just enough to get going and pass those people. So while I don't think exhaust temps are a problem per se, it is something I keep an eye on. And the reason I say that is I don't want to keep drawing comparisons to my 6-liter, but it just kind of fits in here. Or at least at this point, I don't want to. What I notice most is my 6-liter would, when pulling one of these, a grade or something, what would happen is my temps would spike and then they would immediately drop back down. So, and they would drop down and settle around maybe 1100, whereas these I've seen 1400. And again, for short bursts, that's not really anything to worry about. But if I can avoid it the most that I can, I would like to. Sorry if you hear my turn signal as I'm kind of passing some people. I'm really good at multitasking in the sense of driving and talking. Now, since I'm thinking of it here, I'll talk about braking. One of the nicest things, how well these new trucks brake. I never felt like I had an issue stopping this load with my 6-liter, but I never had the exhaust brake feature engaged either. So you get a very similar transmission braking setup to this. I believe the rotors and brakes. I'll have to look this up specifically. I know the last time I did a brake job on one of these, they certainly looked larger. But they're pretty massive braking system. So you throw the exhaust brake and stuff in there, and it is so nice how well... Sorry, GPS cutting me off there. It's just so nice how well these trucks stop now. Again, it's not that I ever felt like I had a hard time stopping it with my last truck. So I never had an issue stopping this with my other truck. It's just I do have to say with the exhaust brake feature and stuff, going down hills and holding your speed instead of gaining too much speed, so much easier with these newer vehicles. Again, on the 6-liter, I never used the exhaust brake feature that tuning can turn on for you. But I will say on the 15s and newer, it is so good. It's such an effective system and just works very flawlessly. I also like that you can engage them separately. So if I want, I can turn my exhaust brake off. I can turn it on while just daily driving without using tow haul. So it's really, really nice how they have this set up in this truck. Now, just a little tidbit, I have a friend that had a 2015 as well. His camper's about, I think it's about 1,000 or 1,500 more than mine, and he was towing with his 250. He recently purchased a newer Chevy L5P with a 10-speed transmission. And when I was talking to him, I was just camping with him, about how the truck did towing compared to his other truck. The only real thing he really said is he loved the 10-speed transmission. But he did say that the exhaust brakes performed very, very similarly. I don't think anyone's made huge strides in how well the exhaust brakes work on the GMs or Ford in a while. I could be wrong on that. There's channels that are capable of testing that more than I can. But for most of your driving, you're probably not going to tell a difference. All right, so we're going to talk temps now here. We're going to focus on 3. We're going to talk about transmission, oil, and coolant. So coolant right now, I'm sitting at 192. My oil is 208. They're actually currently dropping because the road I'm on, I'm not working the truck as hard. Now, I'm also not able to go as fast, so the cooling isn't as efficient, but they are on the way down. My transmission's sitting at 205. That really hasn't changed, to be honest, even though I'm not necessarily working the truck as hard. Here's the thing. The way the Ford's transmissions are designed, they just run hotter. I don't like the fact that it runs at 205-ish. I think I've seen it a little bit hotter than that, but it just, even without a load, when it warms up, it runs around that. So I am going to put a bit at the end of this talking about upgrades that I want to do, and we're going to talk about that to see if we can't improve that just a little bit. Again, phenomenal braking right there. You guys can't see what's in front of me, but I just appreciate the braking. Now also, I have coming up on like 1,700 miles of towing with this in the last couple weeks. I took this from where my campsite is in Erie County in New York, which is like around Buffalo, to my house, to South Carolina, back to my house, and now I'm in the process of taking it back to camp. So I have more than a couple miles under my belt towing with this setup, plus about a little less than 300 miles towing with the last truck. So I've done a fair amount of towing with just a factory setup 6.7, that is. I think the only mod on my black truck I had was I replaced the cold side intercooler pipe, which I didn't do on this yet, but I do have one in my camper in case something happens during this trip because it's still the factory one. But so far so good. Keep your fingers crossed, because that would put a really big damper on my trip. So coolant's right now 204, oil's 219. So I haven't really seen anything much more than that on any of my towing. Some of my towing's been through 94, 95 degree heat. You know, if I do see it while I'm towing, or if I find out later after this video's done, I'll make sure to put it in here what my highs were. But I'd say 205, 220 has been about my norm. Boost, the most boost I've seen out of this truck with a load And again, I was able to pull it just fine. I saw about 25, I think, out of the one. I think that's the highest. I don't feel these trucks boost super high in factory form, which boost is not necessarily a direct indication of performance. Like, I'm pulling a grade now and I'm in it pretty good. I'm at 22. So right now the exhaust brake is on. I'm getting 36 PSI of exhaust back pressure. As soon as I touch the throttle, it disengages. Now I'm back down to 4. Only making 1 or 2 PSI of boost here, but I'm still kind of going slightly downhill. So those are some of the big numbers while towing that I try to keep an eye on. Like right now I have DPF load on up if the DPF is actually regenning or not. Now moving on to fuel economy. Fuel economy is going to be a pretty short section. There isn't a whole lot to say about it. It does vary a good bit. On trips, if I'm down around 55, I'm getting around 11. 65, I've noticed I'm 10 and a half. And if I'm at 70, I'd say I'm around 9.5. I will say those are driving still like pretty conservative, like taking my time getting up to speed a little bit. Not going slow, but taking my time. There's a difference between seeing how fast I can get there and kind of just cruising along and getting up to speed. I've tested kind of being, I don't want to say aggressive driving, but kind of being more aggressive with the truck, getting up to speed quicker. Maybe sometimes when I would back out of the throttle a little, I might stay in it. So things of that nature. I've noticed that you can drop your fuel economy pretty quick. If you haven't towed a whole lot, my recommendation would be to kind of try being a little more reserved and see how you do. And at least gauge what kind of fuel economy you get. If you're going to be really aggressive, pushing 65, 70, you're probably going to drop down to like 8.5 miles per gallon. Again, this is a completely factory truck, so bear that in mind. You can get the higher numbers, but it does come at a cost of some time, honestly. Which once you're up to speed, it's not a big deal, but kind of just taking your time, being a little calmer in how you drive the truck can give you a good bit of fuel economy back. Again, I've tested both driving styles. I got like 8.8 going the last leg going home. I think it was like the last 130 miles from Myrtle Beach, when I was averaging 9.7, I think, one, and 10.3 the other tank of gas. So fuel, excuse me. So bear those things in mind. Now I'm going to talk about some features I really like on the truck. We're going to start with the integrated brake controller. It's amazing. Guys, if you get one of these trucks that, I don't know if you can get one of these without a brake controller in it, don't buy an aftermarket one. Spend the money and just get the Ford one. It's so nice. It's clean on your dash. You don't have to worry about stuff, so it's not like you got wires or you're drilling holes into your dash to make things fit. It just fits super well. It's super simple. It's in a good spot to grab. I almost activated it, which would have sucked because I'm driving. Your controls to increase or decrease are right there with it, so you can just mess with it right there. Everything's within reach. I don't have to like go reaching down here for it. It's right here. I don't sit super close, but not super far from the steering wheel, but I can easily reach this. And again, I just like how clean the install of it is. Again, maybe there's a braking system that requires a special feature that these don't support. There might be something out there I'm not aware of. I certainly haven't used it all, so to speak. But I will say something to kind of bear in mind, guys, like just the ease, and plus you have a nice, easy to work with factory warranty. Another thing I like is the fact that the exhaust brake is separate from the tow haul mode. This is something most manufacturers, I think all three of the big guys do it, Dodge, Chevy, and Ford. I believe in the 11 through 14s, I know it didn't have a separate button. I believe it still had an exhaust brake feature. It was just integrated into the tow haul mode. I dislike that I can't mess with it separately. I think somebody makes a switch to kind of mess with it separately, but again, It's BD Diesel that I'm thinking of, and I really like their stuff. So I'm not saying I wouldn't try it. I just don't know that I would. If I had bought an 11 through 14, though, I'd be upgrading a lot of crap on it to make it a 15 essentially, because I like the injection system better, the turbo system better. Anyway, I digress. I don't know what Chevy and Dodge did in those years. They may have always had it separate. I'm not sure. I don't know when they integrated exhaust brakes in like the factory form. I'm certain since they were VGT turbos that, you know, that they've been using VGT for a long time. I'm certain that it was an option to use. I just don't know how they did it. The next feature and the last feature I'm really going to talk about here that's related to towing is I like that I can manually shift without taking it out of drive. So if I see a grade coming and I don't necessarily want to like floor it to get my truck to downshift, I can kind of control it into the gear that I want it in, or essentially you can downshift with it. I haven't found the need to do that part of it, or at least to help slow me down, but I will say several times I have used it to drop a gear when I'm about to see a hill. Is it one of those things? I'm trying to think what I want to say exactly. It's one of those things I really like to have as an option. I'm glad it's in the truck. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think it is something that like needs to be there either. It's a really nice feature because it does give you a little more control when you want to, when you're about to pass somebody, instead of like really just getting in it and then you drop that gear. It's just a little nicer to be able to pop it down one, and then once you're up, pop it back where it needs to be, and then you're good. Now, comfort, which seems like a weird one to say, guys, I'm not gonna lie. But I will just say, if there's one thing about this truck that I notice over my 6-liter is the comfort of it. I did a lot of driving in a couple of days when I went to vacation. So I did 5 hours up to camp, 7 back through the middle of the night after being up all day. And then the following, within, let's see here, 18 hours of that, I was towing again to South Carolina for about 11. I think it took us 12 hours to get there. It's not a loud truck. The cab is well insulated, so it's nice and quiet. At one point, I had 2 passengers that were with me. They enjoyed that it wasn't super loud like my 6-liter was. I will say I do want to make my 6-liter, the interior quiet, not the engine, which is some of what you're seeing, because essentially it's the exact same cab. It's just they're probably using better materials, and the big thing is the engine itself is just quieter. But it's a very comfortable ride. The seats are comfortable, which I would expect from any of the manufacturers today. Even though this truck is now getting older, you know, it's a 6-year-old truck. Not that that's an old vehicle by any means, but it's not brand new. It handles really nice. I will say my steering feels a tad light, but that's because I actually have airbags sitting right here behind me that I meant to put on vacation. And I'm going to be honest, between the second week I had to do school and just hanging out with friends I haven't gotten to hang out with in so long, I didn't have it in me. So that'll be for next year. I really wanted to do a comparison towing with the airbags now compared to on the trip down, but I won't be able to do that. So I will at some point do a video talking about towing with and without airbags. And here again, plenty of power to pass people. But overall, the truck handles really nice. It's just a very enjoyable truck to tow with. It's weird. The truck never seems like it's working hard. And that, like my 6-liter, there's times it really feels like it's working to do what it needs to do. It does it really well, especially with all the modifications that have been done to the truck. But this truck, while it might not always, just kind of jumping into the last section, while it doesn't seem like it pulls as hard as my 6-liter does, it also never feels like it's working hard. So it's kind of a weird comparison to make because, again, it doesn't feel like it's working at all. But I know it is, obviously, because it's got a fair amount of weight hooked up. I would like that driver to stay in their lane. But it never really feels like it's working. I will say I've towed with my buddy's GM, his LML, and it had a very similar feeling to that. It did the job well, but it never felt like it was working hard to do it. It also never felt like it had the same pull as my 6.0. So, but again, these newer trucks, it's just a very different towing experience. While we're at it, talking about my buddy's, I believe it was a 15 or 16 LML. So basically GM's version of this. And I will say this, I do prefer the Ford. I know that's shocking because I obviously have a little bit of a bias to Ford. But at the same time, there's this dually that like wants to race right beside me. But at the same time, I do feel that you can tell that this has the extra horsepower of that. I think it's like 43 more horsepower and 60, don't quote me on that, 60 more pound-feet of torque or something. I forget what this has over GM's equivalent in those years, but it is noticeable. I will say, since I did make that comment very briefly, guys, at the same token, you will not feel that this truck does it significantly better or worse, or, you know, both trucks are really, really good. If you're in the market for like a 6 or 7 year old truck, I will say they do it well. If you don't feel like modifying a truck, I will say I actually would prefer the GM products, like the LML this is, over what Ford did in 11 through 14. I don't like that turbo, and if you're not somebody that wants to modify those things, I'm going to get so much hate for people for me making fun of that turbo. It spooled stupid fast. It made good power, but it choked out up top. It was a very small turbo that does have a higher failure rate. Please, I know someone down in the comments is going to be like, I have an 11 with 487,296 miles, and it's the original turbo. Look, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying they do have higher failure rates, guys. That's all I'm saying. So if you're not somebody that's willing to make those changes, if you're someone, my preference is if I had 11 through 14, I would change. That's a lie. I probably wouldn't buy an 11. I would, but a 12, 13's the first year they've really had the 6.7. Like, they're all reliable trucks, but the 13 was kind of something special for the 6.7 because they really nailed it that year and have continued to make solid improvements since. Well, I guess we're putting my microphone to the test today because now it's raining outside, so hopefully it's drowning most of this out. Now some comparisons from my 6-liter. Essentially, now I will say this, the most recent time towing, I had like 34-inch tires on my 6.0 and the factory gear ratio with the transmission. So if I went back down to like a factory height vehicle running the same size tires that came factory, I'd probably see a little bit better miles per gallon, but essentially you're getting identical fuel economy with these trucks. The new ones aren't necessarily doing it any better than my 6-liter did. I got around 10 with my 6-liter, give or take here and there. So that's unfortunate because I was really hoping to get better fuel economy, and I'm hoping as I do a few mild upgrades to this truck that maybe we can squeak a little bit better fuel economy out of it. Other than that, we talked about the fact that this is just a more comfortable truck. It's, you know, the steering's nicer in the newer vehicles. It's quieter inside, gives you a nice interior. I like the updates to the interior as well that Ford has done over the years. This is, I think an 08 is essentially when they kind of went to this style interior. They've done a few updates here and there, but overall I like them. The additions to a nice exhaust brake, I'm a big fan of. So a lot of what they've done, I've been a really big fan of. Ford's done an excellent job improving this platform. I think it would be cool at some point for me to tow with an earlier one. I don't have that option. I'd also love to tow with one of the newer ones. People do say, I think in the 17 year they did a nice jump in performance. And again, in 20, obviously they did as well. It would be cool to really get the tow with those. The jump in performance in 17 wasn't huge, and that's actually essentially the same truck. So it's really just a tuning thing they did, to my knowledge. There's a reworked air intake on those years, but that's basically the main thing. So nothing earth-shattering there. I can probably get very similar performance after just a tune on this, if an EPA compliant tune, I swear. Which there's good options out there. Bankster Ranger is probably the most prominent and probably the best overall from anything I've seen, until you start talking off-road stuff, which is pretty much become non-existent thanks to the EPA. But I will say the truck does tow nicer than my 15. And I think that's because my 15 was just in rough shape. I don't know that it really ever came through on the videos how rough of shape it was. I don't think the DPF system was working correctly, which I had on when I was towing this. I think it needed replaced, or at least was in need of replacement. I did to a video taking it off just to show people. But it's very expensive to replace, so I did, and I put it back in. I will say I noticed when towing, because the truck's working harder, it regens a lot less than it does when the truck is just driving around town. I have about a 20-25 minute commute to work with the truck, and I haven't actually owned it very long prior to putting the fifth wheel rails in and towing for the first time, so it's been a little bit of a experience. So I am still working on gathering some of that information to bring to you guys, but I think that's about it. I do plan to do some upgrades. Basically, this truck performed very similar but better overall to my 15. It's a more comfortable ride, but I feel like I can push my 6-liter harder than I could this truck. So that's kind of it. Now, my 6-liter isn't a fair comparison because it's got so many modifications, and a lot of them were geared towards towing, even though they also kind of second as really fun for street use as well. But I will say that truck I can push harder, but overall it doesn't do quite as well driving it as this setup here does. So I still think a 6-liter is relevant. I think 6-liters can still compete with modern trucks, just they lose some creature comforts, like the ability to turn my exhaust brake on and off, separate from my tow haul mode, which you'll lose in a 6-liter unless there's some weird thing out there to make that happen I'm not aware of yet. But at the same time, it's going to get very similar fuel economy as well. I think where you lose some of that ability to compete and be relevant is when people talk about factory gearing and putting big tires. Like, I could tell I lost some performance when I went with 34s. 33s, I didn't really tell a difference. The factory comes with 31s. So a lot to bear in mind, but that is my review. The truck did well. Let's talk about some very quick updates for this truck that I want to do. One being a fuel tank. We're going to get a larger fuel tank. I'm looking at options from Titan and S&B. S&B being my preference, but Titan has like a 50-gallon tank that replaces the factory one. Nothing needs to be deleted. Nothing. It goes right in the factory place. It's not as big. I think it's only 50 gallons instead of, like, I think the S&B is 56. It's not one of the larger. I think somebody makes a 60. It's a lot of fuel, and for my needs, I'm going to need to stop sooner than that tank's going to run out. So I would like to get one of those by the time I tow again, which this will probably be my last towing trip for the season. The airbags are a must. I want to do a compressor setup with them as well. But the airbags will be installed soon. I'll have a video out on that. I will try some mild things like an air intake. I do want to do a turbo upgrade. I want to be able to pull hills the way my 6-liter does. This truck makes enough power to do it. It's just a little restrictive on the exhaust side. So if I correct that part, we'll be able to pull better than my 6-liter does. But a modified 6.0 can compete with a stock 6.7. There are some downsides to it, don't get me wrong. Other things I want to do, I want to try to see if a transmission cooler upgrade won't help bring those temps down a little bit. I would like them to run a little cooler. That being said, the system is designed to work this way. Ford knows it runs this hot. I will say my 6-liter and the GM I've previously towed with once did not run that hot. They ran around like 160, 170 tops. 170 if I was working it hard. And that was actually more using the transmission to help slow the load, which the 6-liter didn't have an exhaust brake, so I saw it more in that truck with a little bit of increased temp than I did the GM product. And I also have exhaust manifolds for this truck. This truck is going to get a set of BD exhaust manifolds. They sent those out to the channel forever ago, so we're going to get them in the truck at some point. So we do have some upgrades for it already planned, and we'll be able to kind of, unfortunately won't be able to test each individual part, but by next year we should be able to test the whole setup and see how it's doing. Anyway guys, that's my review. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Drop those comments down below. I'll see you in the next upload.